Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and today we're taking a look at a Knight's Armament XM9 suppressor. This is a snap-on suppressor for the Beretta Model 92. It's colloquially called the Hush Puppy, and that name dates back to the Vietnam War when the first iteration of really an American military suppressed service pistol was developed based on the Smith Wesson Model 39. Now, it was called Hush Puppy because there was some reticence in standard U.S. Army hierarchy to the idea of giving Special Forces guys something that was seen as like an assassin's pistol. You know, a suppressed pistol is just, it's not really according to the norms of traditional honorable warfare. So the SEALs, the other Special Forces guys, really needed something like this, and so what they did is they gave it the name Hush Puppy and talked about it being used as a pistol for use on guard dogs, and ignored the fact that they were also going to be using it on the guards themselves. At any rate, pistol was adopted, developed, used in Vietnam, and then this is a later iteration of the same name, because once again we have a suppressed service pistol. However, this one was developed in the 1980s at the request of the U.S. Air Force. The Air Force was looking to give pilots a more effective weapon in a survival kit. Should they be shot down, they wanted, well, something that would give them a little better utility. And the idea was, at this point, they were already giving them Beretta M9 pistols, but if you can add a small, simple, effective suppressor to that package, it gives a pilot a much better chance, or at least potentially a better chance, of being able to use that pistol successfully. Because you're not going to go play Rambo with just a Beretta M9. If you have to actually shoot it, probably a good chance you're going to be a lot better off if you can shoot it very quietly. So this was developed. This was actually sold to the Air Force. About 3,800 of them were sold to the Air Force, as well as an unknown number to other sneaky people sort of agencies. But it's a suppressor that has a number of interesting features to it. So it's not threaded. It is a wipe-based suppressor, which, well, I'll tell you what. Let's take a closer look at it, and I'll tell you what wipes in a suppressor actually are. So here's the suppressor set as it came from Knight's. They have a manual in there, and then the nice little carry case with all of the requisite components. Using this with a standard pistol requires the barrel with the appropriate cuts, and then you've got a set of wipes. You've got a spare internal wipe container along with the two spacers that go in it, and of course the suppressor itself. There are three things that we want to look at in particular here. One of them is the slide lock device, one of them is how the suppressor attaches, and the other is how the suppressor actually works. So let's start at the back with the slide lock. The purpose of the slide lock is, as the name implies, it locks the slide forward and it turns the gun into a single shot pistol. And there are two reasons that you would want to do this. The first is that it reduces the noise of firing for a couple reasons. You don't have the sound of the pistol cycling manually, which we don't normally think of as being particularly loud, but if the gunshot is being significantly muffled, that action noise actually is fairly significant. In addition, when you have a suppressor, you're generating an additional back pressure in the pistol, and what you'll typically get is noise of gas escaping, popping from the chamber when the pistol opens up. And so having the slide locked also prevents that noise. Now, originally, when the slide lock system was put into the early Smith & Wesson 39 Hush Puppies, it also had the function of making the pistol more reliable. When you have a pistol with a short recoil system, like this, but in particular the Browning-style tipping barrel guns, hanging a big weight of a suppressor off the front of the pistol does a lot to disrupt the dynamics of the pistol actually functioning properly and can cause pistols to malfunction. Having a slide lock ensures that the gun's not going to jam because it's not even going to be able to cycle. So the idea was you can lock it and then manually cycle the slide, which is easily done reliably. You know that will work because it's not depending on recoil energy of the gun, and then get your next shot, and that works nicely in conjunction with the reduced noise. However, since the Vietnam period, there have been devices developed, really it's one, it's called a Nielsen device, which is basically a spring-loaded buffer in the suppressor attachment, which allows the barrel to cycle backward normally, independent of the weight of the suppressor. It's very clever, it's a subject for a separate video, but as a result, we don't really need to lock slides. We don't really have to worry about reliability of pistols with suppressors so much anymore. Now I do want to point out this particular one on the Air Force issue pistols was of course nitrided black to match the finish of the guns. This particular one is an aftermarket addition to this pistol, and for whatever reason they decided to leave it in the white. But the design and the function are identical to that of the original Knight's XM9. So you can see I've got my trigger finger here to operate it. You push it up and the slide can't move. Pull it down and the slide can. Now the second thing to take a look at here is how the suppressor attaches. This was called by Knights a snap-on suppressor. It is quicker to attach than a threaded suppressor and easier as well. You don't have to worry about cross-threading. You don't have to worry about it coming loose. What we have is a spring-loaded plunger. We can pull this off, and the barrel that is used, typically for a suppressor you would replace your normal barrel, this guy, with a threaded barrel. Well, instead here we replace it with a barrel that has these two scallop cuts on either side. And that works in conjunction with a pair of pins that have a matching cutout. So when I push this up, it can slide right onto the barrel and snaps right in place. Conveniently, the top of this snap attachment functions as your rear sight. There's a front sight bead on the suppressor, so instead of trying to deal with modifying the sights on the gun, they just added a separate set of sights to the suppressor that you can use. So you actually kind of get two sight pictures with the gun. It's a little funky until you get a little practice with it, but that's a very effective way of getting what is, I should say, a reasonable but not great sight picture. Because this isn't tightly threaded on, well, you probably can't see it, but this does wobble a little bit. There's a little bit of play to it. When you take the suppressor on and off, your zero is going to change. It's not a particularly, there's no good way to zero these. They're not adjustable, and wipes, which we will get to in a moment, make it very difficult to properly zero, repeatably zero a pistol like this. So it's not particularly accurate, either in terms of where the group is or how big the group is. But that's an acceptable trade-off for the suppression effect that you get from it. You're not supposed to be trying to snipe things with this. Now we can go in and take a look at how the suppressor itself actually works. We do have markings on the top here. It is a Model XM9 made by Knight's Armament. That probably would not have been marked on the original Air Force ones, but they are on this. We'll get into that in a moment. Now we can unscrew the front end. This blue thing is a rubber O-ring to help seal it. And what we've got is this container of wipes. The rest of the suppressor is just a hollow, empty tube. There's nothing else in there. So in practice, when this is assembled, you've got one really big expansion chamber here, and then the bullet starts hitting wipes. Let's take this apart as well. Dump that out. There's the front end. And there's everything that goes into this. So what we have in practice is a stack like this. We have polyethylene rubber wipes, as they're called. They're basically washers here. And the idea is when you fire, the bullet's actually going to poke a hole through these. Some wipe suppressors come with wipes that have a little X cut in them to make it easier for a bullet to create a hole. On the XM9, they're just totally solid. And that means you've got the minimal amount of, well, no gas can get through this until the bullet goes through. And these tend to seal back up a little bit behind the bullet after it passes through. You've got 3 of them, and then a spacer. So you've got a little bit of another expansion chamber, then a further 3 wipes, then another spacer, and then 2 final wipes. Now the way this works is your first shot is by far the quietest because there are no holes in any of these. When you go to fire your second shot, you've now punched a hole through all of them, but it's not that big, like it's resealed itself a little bit. Your second shot's still very quiet, but by the time you get to about 25 shots through, you basically have a bullet-sized hole running through the whole length of the thing, and that significantly reduces its effectiveness, and the gun becomes substantially louder. So when it comes to recreational shooting, that's not great, because once you've put about 25 rounds through, if you want it to work properly again, you have to replace these with a new set, like we have here. Now, for the purposes of the Air Force, that's really not a problem. Like, you don't expect a downed pilot to go Rambo with his Beretta and, you know, destroy the entire Iraqi army, or wherever he is. And frankly, he's not carrying that much ammunition anyway. And as a nice sort of unintended consequence, or perhaps intended consequence, if your pilot does get captured and the enemy ends up with this fancy high-tech suppressed pistol, well, it's not going to be very suppressed for all that long, unless they happen to have their own supply of new wipes. So that is the idea of wipe suppressors. The alternative are baffles, which are basically permanent baffles inside the suppressor tube that serve to redirect the gas and delay its expansion.
All right, so we are actually going to do a little bit of shooting with the Hush Puppy. So pull my ear out because I won't need it. We of course have the suppressor. Snap that guy right on there. And I'm going to go ahead and use the slide lock, so we won't even get the mechanical sound of the gun operating, in theory. There we go. So this is going to operate as a single shot pistol. I'll fire, it will not cycle, it will not eject. I will have to manually unlock it, cycle the action. And this is our first round, so we're shooting through wipes. That's quite quiet. Did you hear that? I don't know if that came through on camera, but you actually got a puthup of residual pressure because the wipes in this are still intact enough that even after a bullet goes through them, the can's holding a little bit of pressure that comes out when I open the slide.
Need any help?
That's really cool and really quiet. Let's see if we get another pop. Yep. I hope that comes through on camera. It's just a little thump. I don't know that I'm actually hitting the target though, because we're not using the pistol sights, we're using the sights on the suppressor itself. You can actually hear the gas hissing out through the baffles after each shot. Pop.
Yeah, it's you know, people don't go good. Yes, you did.
All right, now let's try it without the slide lock and see how much noise the mechanical operation of the gun actually adds to this. That actually adds quite a lot of noise. It's still really quiet, but compared to when the gun's locked and single shot, and I can actually feel gas blowing back onto my hand because of the amount of back pressure generated by that suppressor. It's an interesting experience. There we go. I finally managed to hit one on the very last round. So, that is the Knight's Armament Hush Puppy suppressor. Very cool.
All right, now that we've done some shooting, let's go ahead and take a look at how the baffles look. You can see we've got a nice old hole in the front there. So there's our big old hollow expansion chamber. And then this guy, which is, there we go, not too gummed up. Actually not as dirty as I would have expected either. All right, let's poke these guys out. There's our stack of baffles plus the one that was at the front. And you can see that that is what happens over the course of a full magazine. So actually slightly more. I think we put 21 rounds through this. So this is, of course, why these become less effective as you use them. The hole gets bigger and bigger as you shoot through it. Interesting that this middle set of baffles, well, some of these just have different size permanent holes in them than others. That's kind of interesting. So there's the whole set of them laid out now. This is, I believe, the one that was at the very front. Interestingly, you can actually reorder these and restack them back in the suppressor and extend the life a little bit by, you know, putting the ones with the smallest holes in place of ones like the very front one that are the most important. So in general, though, the lifespan on this is supposed to be about 25 rounds, and then you just go in with a new set of clean wipes to replace them. That, you know, for recreational shooting, that's a gigantic pain and not a good solution. But for what this pistol was actually designed for, short functional lifespan is really just fine. The original contract for these guns was in the mid-1980s, and the same suppressor idea would end up also being applied to the offensive handgun program that came in the early 1990s. That, of course, ended up being a .45, but Knight's Armament did actually have a significant role in development of the suppressors for the HK Mark 23 that eventually won that bid, although ultimately not really in this form. They came out in 2018 and re-released a couple hundred of these suppressors onto the civilian market, probably new old stock that they hadn't sold originally, and that's where this particular one comes from, as well as most of the other ones that are out there right now. So it's a really cool, a little bit of a look back at older suppressor technology, because this style isn't something that's used a lot these days, but it certainly has its applications, including the Air Force application, for which I think it was actually pretty well suited. Anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.